All right, hello guys. So before we get into today's episode, I just want to let you know that I'm currently enrolling for my signature program, the Online Summit Program. Now, specifically for this week, I'm looking for no more than 10 hikers who want to get strong and pain-free so they can conquer every adventure. Now, if that sounds like you and you want to learn a little bit more about this program and see if it may be a good fit for you and your situation, please shoot me an email to rowan@summitstrength.com.au. That's ROWAN with the words "I'm interested." From there, we can find a bit of a time to chat, we can talk through it all and see if it might be a good fit for you. So if you want to find out more, shoot me an email, rowan@summitstrength.com.au, and we can go from there. So now that's enough for that. Let's get into today's episode. Hey, my name is Rowan Smith, and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast, which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare, and conquer your upcoming hike, trek, or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude, and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable, and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for. Let's get into today's episode. All right, hello guys. Today we are going to be talking about training like a bodybuilder. And specifically, I'm going to be running through a little bit of a checklist of sorts. So you can sort of look at your own strength training that you're doing at the moment, and you can ask yourself the question, are you in fact training like a bodybuilder at the moment? Now, the reason I want to talk about this today is because when it comes to strength training, you know I love it for hikers, but when it comes to the application of strength training, in the fitness world, the first place most of us look, intentionally or not, is at the bodybuilding approach to strength training. Now, if you've gone into a gym, if you've downloaded a workout program off the internet, if you've seen a personal trainer, more than likely you probably experienced this type of training in one form or another. And again, I'm going to explain what this is all about in a moment, but as an overview, this type of training, it can be effective. It can help people develop strength and develop muscle, but in my opinion, for a hiker, it really isn't a great way of going about things. It's not incredibly time efficient. It could be, you could be getting much better results with much less effort, and I don't really think it's a good approach. So today I'm going to be just talking you through a few things that sort of, factors that do identify as training like a bodybuilder. So then you can ask yourself, looking at your own training, okay, am I doing these things? Is there potentially a better way of going about things? So the first one I want to talk about, and I see this all the time, and it's not bad if you're doing it, I'm not saying that, but again, I'm saying there's probably better ways of going about your training if you are doing this. But it's sort of classifying your strength training into splitting it up into body parts. So what I mean by this is you'll often hear people in the gym say, okay, I've got a leg day, I've got a chest day, I've got a shoulder and back day, I've got an ab and core day, I've got a arms day, or whatever it may be. You've probably heard this before, and you may be doing it yourself. And the idea behind this is when you are a bodybuilder and specifically doing really particular bodybuilding training, you might only train one muscle group per week, but you do loads and loads and loads and loads of work on that muscle. So for example, on a chest day, you might go in and do 5 or 6 or 7 different exercises on your chest, and that's literally your entire workout. And yes, that kind of makes sense for a bodybuilder or for someone who's specifically looking just to develop particular muscles. But for a hiker, you know what? It's not really the best way to go about things. Number one, the reason behind that is, hikers probably should be emphasizing the legs over the upper body when it comes to their training. Yes, both are important, but the emphasis probably should be on the legs. So when you're looking at doing a leg day and a chest day and a back day or whatever, you end up doing way more upper body training than legs training in the most of the situations. And I just don't think it's a very good way of going about it. Number two is, as a hiker, you probably want to be doing more cardiovascular training than a typical bodybuilder may be doing. So as a bodybuilder approach to this, you may have to do 3, 4, 5 strength sessions a week. But as a hiker, in all honesty, if you're taking a different approach, you may only have to do 1, 2, or 3 strength sessions a week, as opposed to doing loads and loads and loads. So that's really the first sign. If you're looking at your training right now, you're looking at your program, you're like, well, you know what, I do have a back day, I do have a shoulder day, do have a chest and abs day, or whatever it may be. You know what, there might potentially be a better way for you. Now, number 2 to identify yourself is kind of goes hand in hand with that, is breaking up each exercise in your program to target one particular muscle. So, for example, you choose an exercise to target your quadriceps, then you choose an exercise to target your hamstrings, and then choose an exercise to target your glutes, then for your chest, then for your back, then for your biceps, then for your triceps, then for your shoulders, and so on with all of that. And yeah, again, this can work. Like, it's doable, and it can develop muscle and develop strength. There's no arguing that, but there's definitely better ways. So if you're going into the gym and you're going, okay, I'm going to go on this machine to do this machine to do this, and you end up doing 10 different exercises for 10 different muscle groups, you know what? I would argue there's probably a better way of going about it. Alternatively to this, as opposed to looking at every single muscle you want to target, I would advocate for targeting particular movements. So instead of trying to do an exercise for your back and for your biceps, maybe do an exercise that's going to target an upper body pulling movement. Instead of doing an exercise that can target your chest and your triceps individually, do an exercise that's an upper body pushing movement. And classifying things in a push and pull and as more movement patterns as opposed to muscles, in my opinion, that's a bit of a better way to go about it. Now, the next thing, which is very, very common with bodybuilding training, and I know a lot of people do it in the hiking world, is doing, 5 or more exercises per muscle group per workout. So what I mean by this is, previously we're talking about, okay, and we're going to target particular muscle groups. And this might be a case of doing, okay, I want to really get really strong quadriceps. So I'm going to do 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 exercises in a workout, specifically hammering home on this body part. So it might be a case of doing a lunge and then a step up and then a squat, then a leg extension, then a leg press, maybe a hack squat, and just bang and bang and bang and bang. And it's super, super common you'll see on programs you download off the internet, but in all honesty, it's not super necessary. My opinion, if you're doing 2, 3, 4 exercises that target a particular muscle group or, are work in a particular area, if you go in with intent, meaning you're training focused, meaning you're training with some purpose and really, really go, put your effort into that. In my opinion, that's much, much, much more effective for a hiker than, doing exercise after exercise after exercise. I really don't think it's a very good way of going about it. The next thing that bodybuilders will often do, and I don't think hikers do quite as well on this, is bodybuilders are really, really strict on their rest periods, and they only rest for a moderate to small amount of time in between sets. Now, what I mean by that is typically a bodybuilder will rest around about 90 seconds in between each set of exercises. So they do a set of squats, have 90 seconds rest, do it again, have 90 seconds rest, do it again. In all honesty, yes, that can be effective for bodybuilders, but for hikers, we probably want to be getting a little bit more rest in between sets of an exercise. So typically, we want to be aiming for 2 minutes or more rest in between each set of exercise when we're trying to develop strength as a hiker. Now, what this is going to do is make sure we do get the rest we need to recover in between sets so we can perform during our work, so we can actually develop strength really, really well. And then for my way of going about it, which I'm a big advocate for, is in those rest periods, you're not just sitting around for 2 or 3 minutes doing absolutely nothing, but you fill that up with exercise in other body parts. So you might do some core work, you might do some mobility work, you might do some upper body work, or whatever it may be. But there's going to be at least 2 minutes of rest in between each set you do on your legs. And I think that's much, much, much more effective than only resting the 90 seconds that bodybuilders will typically do. The next thing that we'll often see in a typical bodybuilding program, which I don't think hikers really need to do, is training to failure all the time. Now, what I mean by that is, there's often this approach in the go hard, go home mentality when it comes to strength training. Meaning if you're not doing exercises or not doing sets where you get to the end and you literally can't do any more, where you're jelly-legged and you're pushing out and you're grunting and moaning and all of this stuff, that is really, really put up on a pedestal in the bodybuilding world. And a lot of people do strive to do that in their own training. But for a hiker, you know what? It's just not necessary. You don't need to be training to failure all the time. If you enjoy it, absolutely, do it every once in a while. But it's not necessary. Typically for my hikers, I'll ask them to try and find a weight where, they finish up where they could have done probably a couple more repetitions almost all the time. So if we're recommending to do 8 repetitions, I want them to choose a weight where they could probably do 10 if they really wanted. So they're always finishing with a couple of reps in reserve. They're always finishing before that failure point. And that in itself, it's still very, very effective for strength development, but it doesn't cause all this time that you take extra time it takes to recover and all of that jazz. So training to failure all the time. And then finally, the last thing is doing super, super long strength sessions. Now, bodybuilders, they love the gym. And fair enough, you may love the gym as well. But as a hiker, you don't need to be spending ages and ages and ages in the gym per session. At most, I would say if you're doing your strength training, at most a hiker really needs to train 60 minutes or less. And I'll give my clients, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minute sessions, whatever they want. But typically I won't really ask them to do more than 60 minutes unless they, for some very particular reason, they want to spend more time. If you're doing 90 minutes, 2-hour sessions in the gym of just strength work, in all honesty, you can probably cut that down a lot and still see some really phenomenal results if you structure your program right. And the reason bodybuilders do that is because they're trying to fit in so much work. They put so much effort into their recovery and they just love the gym as a social outlet. And that's why they spend so long, but it's just not necessary for a hiker. So essentially, if you're listening to this today and you're like, you know what, some of this does sound familiar. This kind of does sound like what I'm doing with my strength training. Just know there probably is a better way for you. Not to say what you're doing is wrong. Not to say what you're doing won't work, but in all honesty, I think you can probably see better results with less effort and less time committed if you follow a bit of a different approach. So if you are following this bodybuilding approach, I would probably advocate maybe it is time to explore a bit of a different change. You may be surprised at what the results can bring. Now, if you were wanting a bit of help with that, if you were interested in learning a little bit more about this strength training that doesn't have to you spending hours and hours in the gym, doesn't have you having to go hard or go home, doesn't have you spending, all this time focusing on particular little muscle groups and getting real finicky with all this stuff. If you're looking for a better way, I would absolutely love to hear from you. Now, if you haven't heard already, this week I am doing a big promotion for my signature program, which is the Online Summit program. Now, as part of that program, we always put a big emphasis into strength training in a very targeted, specific, and efficient way. On top of that, building it out with other types of hiking-related training, such as hiking-specific cardio, hiking programming, recovery mobility work, and a whole bunch of other things. If you were looking for a little bit more targeted training to help you get fit, strong, and resilient for your adventures, I would absolutely love to hear from you. I want you to find my email, rowan@summitstrength.com.au. Just shoot me an email with the words, I'm interested. From there, we can have a little bit of a chat and just see if and how one of my programs may be suited for you and your situation. So if you are training potentially like a bodybuilder, if you were looking for potentially a better way of going about things that are more targeted, more efficient, and potentially more effective for your hiking, don't hesitate. Shoot me a message and we can go from there. So thank you so much for listening and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.